Welcome to edition 99 of Eyes and Teeth. Ben Simmons is a talented young man. Not only does he have his own radio show, this is the show that goes like this on Phoenix FM every Tuesday, but he also writes and performs in pantomime with his father, Keith Simmons. Ben's an incredibly nice fella with so many anecdotes he's been collecting since he was literally 18 months old. His first job was for a famous TV commercial as a 10-year-old, and he grew up with variety and show business in his blood. Ben is always great to catch up with, and I'm so proud to know him and his family. They are an important family in the history of entertainment. So welcome to Eyes and Teeth, the Water Rats, Ben Simmons.
How are you?
Good, thank you. No rest for the wicked.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just thinking, is wicked, you know when they say that phrase, is that wicked as in wicked queen, wicked witch, or is that like, yo man, that is wicked, you is wicked?
I think the phrase came around before people started using wicked as good or whatever, so I don't know.
Oh, so
I don't understand it really.
Oh, no, I don't, because no rest for witches. I don't know what it means.
Like evil people can't rest. It's harder to be evil than be good.
I think so. I think evil people are busier, aren't they? So they were still working.
Always plotting.
Yeah, they were working throughout COVID. They were no lockdowns for the wicked. Oh, that's a new phrase. This sounds like I'm on your radio show.
Nice.
Yeah, we could pull apart these catchphrases, couldn't we?
Yeah, definitely. There'd be another podcast in that. Just what the hell are all these catchphrases about?
Eyes and Teeth. Welcome to Eyes and Teeth. This is season 8, and we're still talking about the Grand Order of Water Rats. And I've got one of my younger brothers in the house. Well, he's in his house, and I'm in mine. But I would like to welcome Benjamin David Simmons. He's an Australian professional basketball player for the Philadelphia 76ers of the National Basketball Association. This is the wrong Ben Simmons. Sorry, Ben Simmons. No, he's one half of...
It's funny. Thanks for that intro. I enjoyed that. In recent months, I have become aware of that basketball player,
Yes.
and he's been dating a well-known British TV presenter called Maya Jama. They were seen together at Wimbledon, and people did genuinely get in touch with my radio programme asking if I was cheating on my wife because I was at Wimbledon with Maya Jama.
I was recently messaging you on your radio show, and I know that your dad messaged me and said, "Go on, tease Ben." So I messaged you while you were doing the show, and he said everyone's doing it. So your dad's probably key for setting up most of those jibes. But I mean, it's genius. I'm sorry I had to bring it up. But how is Maya Jama, by the way? Is she all right?
Well, as far as I know, she's a lovely woman and has a decent presenting career on the TV. But unfortunately, that's where my knowledge of her ends. Ben Simmons, the basketball player, I think knows a lot more about her.
We'll move on to you. We move on to the talented one. No offence to the other Ben Simmons, but yeah, he's the sporty one. Are you sporty at all?
I was quite sporty when I was younger. As I've got older, not quite so much. But yeah, when I was younger, I was into all kinds of... I've always loved football. I played cricket a load as well, and then dabbled in things like tennis and badminton and swimming and stuff, and went to clubs and societies. As I've got older, I've stayed a huge football fan, and I always keep up to date with what's going on in sports, but I don't really play very much at the minute.
Yeah, I was going to ask what school was like for you. Were you into sports, or was it girls, comedy, and balloons? What was your interests?
Not necessarily in that order, but yeah. My secondary school was an all-boys grammar school, and so up until the age of 16, I didn't really sort of mix with girls very much. And then the sixth form was mixed with the girls' school over the road, and it was suddenly like, oh my God, girls exist! Wow, it's weird. But up until then, yeah, I did quite well academically. I was quite good at school.
Okay.
One of those kind of annoying kids that never gets into trouble and is a bit of a goody-goody with the teachers.
Yeah.
But I played sport. I played rugby at school because it was a rugby school. You were kind of forced to play rugby inter-house rugby events, and my house was rubbish. For the first 3 years we got destroyed at all rugby, and then for no reason in year 10 or fourth year or whatever at secondary school, we won. And nobody still to this day knows how it happened, because it was the same people who'd grown up together,
really,
who'd been rubbish for 3 years, suddenly got good. But I played cricket for the school and did quite well with that. And
blimey, that's a posh school.
Yeah, everyone played football in break times, but we didn't really have a sort of school football team as such.
Okay. All right, so you were really into your sports. Blimey, I think I played darts once when I was 16. That's it.
I had a dartboard in my bedroom up until the age of about 18, and it had a blackboard thing that folded out from it that you could write messages on.
Yes.
Me and my mates used to just write stupid, abusive messages to each other, and then it got lost seller for about 20 years, and I found it about 5 years ago and thought, oh my god, I was really pathetically childish when I was about 16 or 17. That was quite fun. Did
it still have the messages on it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Should we go and watch Roseanne on Channel 4 or something like that?
Something like that. It's like, Two Unlimited are brilliant, aren't they? I think it was stuff like that.
Yeah. Who's this Mr. Blobby? Oh, brilliant. So, Ben, welcome to Eyes and Teeth, mate. You're the third family member from the Simmons that I've spoken to. So after this, I don't know if you have any pets I can invite on at all? Or...
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any children of my own. I'm honoured to be the third Simmons. Maybe if I can't get any of my pets on, just approach the basketball guy and see if he'll come on and talk to you about his career. That's what I'd recommend.
I promise I won't bring him up again, but that was your doing then. So Ben, when do you recall that your father and your uncle were always on the road and on the telly? Were you their mascot? Did you follow them? Not follow them, but sort of with permission. Did you jump in the car and sit and watch their shows? What do you remember about the early years?
Yeah, quite frequently. I couldn't tell you the earliest thing I remember. I mean, when I was born, there's photos of me in a dressing room in a theatre in Hull where my dad and uncle were doing panto at the time, and I'm a few weeks old. There's photos of me at Norwich where they did panto one year, and it was the first time I'd ever seen snow, and I think I was 2 years old, and there's pictures of me sort of rolling about the snow and laughing and crying.
Oh, wow.
So I was always kind of born into the industry, and I always loved it. And yeah, when I was a little kid, I remember driving up with Dad on school holidays and going to Scarborough. They did a lot of summer seasons in Scarborough and Bridlington and that area, sort of in the early 80s.
Yeah.
When I was just sort of becoming old enough to appreciate what was going on. And
brilliant.
They would then involve me in the show, and there was a thing, they used to do a thing with a plant where they pretend to fall out on stage, and my Uncle Alan would send my dad off stage and say, go away, and they obviously do the walking up and down the steps routine.
Yes.
And my dad would say, where shall I go? And they used to get an adult plant from the theatre to shout out from the audience, go down your steps. And once I got to the age of about 7, they used to get me to do it whenever I was visiting, and a little kid shouting it out got such a bigger reaction.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it was brilliant, and I loved being part of it and just feeling like I was helping out with their act and stuff like that. I was the kind of kid that was always in theatre dressing rooms whenever I could in the holidays. I remember going to pantos. One they did at the Hippodrome in Birmingham in the early 90s, and I was about 13, 14. And all the cast sort of knew me, and you probably wouldn't be allowed these days with health and safety and safety regulations, but I was able to watch virtually every show from the wings when I was staying there on the Christmas holidays, and I've always loved it.
Oh, that's amazing. I remember my Lola was 6 months old, and I was filming her on the phone backstage. It's probably a video camera back then, actually. And she was in the pram in the green room, probably 10 years ago now. And we're backstage. And then this man walks in the background. I remember looking back at the video and, oh, Nina, look at this. So I'm talking to my baby, and in the background walks Ken Dodd. So you've got I'm supporting Ken, but I've got Nina and my baby with me. And it's quite, in hindsight, it's quite historic for her and me to be in the presence of this comedy king. And at the same time, it was just my boss entering the room to say hello. It was really surreal. But you must
agree. Like you say, when you do that, you kind of, your children just accept it, and that's what happened with me. I've never been the kind of person that gets starstruck or tongue-tied around famous people or whatever, just because I was used to it from such an early age. like Dad did panto with Ken Dodd when I was 3, I think, and actually that's quite a funny story. They introduced me to Ken Dodd when I was 3, and he gave me a tickling stick.
Oh.
And so I think either my mum or Dad were holding me up, and he gave me this tickling stick. This is Uncle Ken, brilliant, brilliant. And then he went away. This is the interval of the show, I think. And I took the plastic protective cover off the bottom of the tickling stick without my mum and dad seeing, and for reasons only known to me, shoved it down my throat.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then cut, obviously, the inside of my mouth and started screaming. And my mum, who just arrived in Birmingham for the first time, because Dad had to do the second half, she had to take me to A&E in Birmingham, not knowing where it was, having a screaming child in the car. And so my first interaction with Ken Dodd was being pleased, overexcited, and shoving a tickling stick down my throat.
I thought you said it was going to be a funny story. That's devastating.
Harrowing. Yeah.
It was quite harrowing. So, at least you didn't stick the tickle stick up your bum. That could have been a different story.
That would have been funnier, definitely, but possibly more harrowing, because I recovered no problem from the throat incident.
Oh, okay, yeah. Whereas the stick would probably still be there and a bit of a problematic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we'll stick to your side of the story.
It's safest, thanks.
I mean, you've been surrounded by comedy, summer seasons and pantomimes your whole life, so it must have been inevitable that you're going to be part of this glitzy world.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the way it all worked out, I'd always, as much as you sort of grow up in the theatre and enjoy that atmosphere, that doesn't kind of guarantee you'll want to do it yourself professionally or even be good enough to do it yourself.
No.
But I always got involved in performing from the age of about 8 at school, and was in school plays and things like that. But the first professional thing I ever did, 1987, not everybody knows this, I don't know if you know this, I might have told you this, but in 1987 I auditioned to be the Milky Bar Kid.
No.
800-900 kids, and I came second. And the kid that came first just recorded the TV advert that went out at that time, and I did a load of personal appearances for 6 months as the Milky Bar Kid at carnivals and photo shoots and stuff like that. So I was actually the Milky Bar Kid in 1987.
That is amazing.
That was my first major kind of thing. And then I did a pantomime at the Orchard Theatre in Dartford, my local theatre where I grew up, at the Christmas of the same year, which was Babes in the Wood. So quite quickly, within a few months, I'd done sort of 2 major sort of professional things at the age of about 10. And I knew then that I wanted to always do it and always be involved in some kind of performing, I think.
Oh, mate, that's a brilliance. I never knew that. I mean, coming second as well. I mean, I only have experience of coming fourth in things that I do. But there's, yeah, I mean, not just Britain's Got Talent. Eggheads, I went on Eggheads, I was fourth. And then...
I did not know that, right. Yeah.
Oh, did you not know? I did. And then I'm trying to think of the TV shows I don't want to come fourth on. And I think Naked Attraction is one of those shows you don't want to be... do you know what I mean?
That is a good point, yeah. Or The
Yeah.
Chase or something like that. That would mean you were first out, wouldn't it? But yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
I still can't believe it's got to a stage where there is a TV show of Naked Attraction.
I know. Where does it go? Is that they've thought of every scenario possible. Think, well, there's only one way we can go. Just get the contestants to get naked, take your clothes off.
How do you go any further than that? It's like, we have a small camera inside these people's bodies, so we're going to look at their organs and what condition they're in, and you pick the one you like the best.
That won't be long. It won't be long. You get Jeff Bezos involved in all that. Also Microsoft. But I think, yeah, with Naked Attraction, I think the only way, if I was going to be on it, to enhance the program, I think I'd just start making things talk. It would be...
Well, it'd be a bit of a giveaway, but if you were naked on it and had naked Arthur Lager on it as well, it can be slightly worrying, but it definitely cause a stir.
It will do, yeah. You'll see exactly where the hand is. So I mean, you kind of nailed the next question, which was like your first performance, and you blew me away with the answer, which I didn't even ask. But thanks for that. That's incredible. So after you left school, I mean, where did you go from there?
Yeah, well, I'd always I always wanted to have an academic background to fall back on. So I finished school, I went to university in Leeds.
Very wise.
And I studied classics, which is quite bizarre, sort of Latin and Greek. And I'd always been into that from a young age. Did classical studies when I was in the first year at secondary school, and that carried on into doing Latin. And it's weird because I studied that, and then since I stopped studying it, I don't think I've ever used it again, other than understanding the root of European languages and things. And if there's language questions on quiz shows, you have sort of some idea about it.
Great.
But when I was at university, I did a couple of things performance-wise, was in a couple of plays and shows and things. I also worked backstage at the City Varieties, did a few technical things backstage and on follow spot.
Oh, wow.
Just to sort of keep my hand in at the theatre. And it's great to have then been... Actually, we did a good old days with you there. It was great to sort of perform at the City Varieties as well, having worked there at the age of 18, 19.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It's such a great history.
In the summers at university, I worked backstage at the Pavilion in Cromer. And again, that's another place that I've worked backstage in and then gone on to perform in later, because Dad and I did the seasons there together.
That's an act, it's brilliant.
So, but basically, once I left school, I went to university, and then while I was at university, I decided I wanted to do a postgraduate course at drama school. And I went to what is now the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. It was just the Central School of Speech and Drama when I was there. 1999 to 2000, I did a one-year postgrad course in acting and musical theatre. Then, again, a sort of weird career turn. I left there and then got a job as a blue coat at a hotel in Brighton that used to be a Butlins and had been taken over from Butlins and was called the Grand Hotel.
Yes, yes.
I became a blue coat for a year, and it was on that contract where I met my wife, Hayley. I was a singer and compere, and she was a dancer in all the shows there.
Wow, that's really strange, like a comedy entertainer meeting a dancer, isn't it?
How bizarre. Never been heard of before.
Yeah, I met mine in 2000 at the Royal Hippodrome in Eastbourne. Nina was a dancer, and so I think it's one of those common stories. Isn't that wonderful, though? And that hotel, me and Nina went there in the early dating years. I think we went and had a night there and watched the entertainment, and we I think we were struggling for money back then as well, and we saved up some pennies. I remember emptying a bag of 2p's at the bar just to get my last drink. It was but that venue, it closed down shortly after.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, we like going back to Brighton, Hayley and I, because that's where we met. So we occasionally have nights out there and stay away down there. We often go and look back at the site, but it's all been converted into flats now, which is quite amazing because they've left a lot of the original buildings.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a shame. But I loved being there, and I loved the ballroom there. Some of the acts we had there were brilliant. Some of the acts were a little bit questionable. But I had my first experience of comparing there. After a few months, they let me compare a couple of shows, and we had a brilliant MD guy down there called Robin Maver, who was a Scottish guy and really lovely. And I was compare, came out, introduced this act, and then sort of had been aspiring to be a compere for so long, because it meant that once the act was on, you could go back into the offices and kind of just chill out and not have to do too much until they finished.
Right.
And I got so overexcited about it, I forgot I had to come on at the end of the show and thank him and sort of finish the night.
Oh, right.
His MD, Robin, had to do it instead.
Oops.
And he came off and he had a massive coat. He was like, what the hell are you doing? How do you forget to come back on at the end when you're comparing the show? I was like, yeah, I've ruined it for everyone.
Oh, no.
Oh, controversial.
We never stop learning, do we, mate? And it's nice, though, that they entrusted you to take on the MC job, because you're comparing the show and putting it all together, and it's a really good groundwork for when you go out there and start to do the theatres and know your audience, in between the acts, and obviously you ended up doing an act yourself, and we'll get onto that now. As we know, Keith and Alan Simmons, a great comedy act for many years, and they went their separate ways, and Keith didn't want to stop, did he? Didn't want to stop the double act. So how did the question come up, and how did you get to join Simmons and Simmons?
Yeah, sure. It's quite interesting, really, because obviously I'd known their act my entire life.
Yes.
And when Alan decided he didn't want to be in the double act anymore, Dad obviously didn't want to stop performing, and Alan got a job which meant he was unable to work the kind of busy times of the year for performers,
Sure.
which was fair enough. But Dad then carried on and did some pantomimes on his own. I think he did 3 years of pantos on his own. And he worked with other performers, and the producer wanted them to still do Simmons Brothers routines in the show, like the Magic Sword Cabinet, which is so well known and people ask for it and like it, you know.
Iconic,
So
isn't it? Yeah.
One year he did the Sword Cabinet with Tim Healy up
Okay.
at the Theatre Royal in Newcastle. Tim Healy was Captain
Yes.
Hook in Peter Pan, and Dad was Smee, I think.
Wow.
And they put them together and did this Magic Cabinet routine. And Tim Healy said it was one of the hardest things he'd ever had to learn, because you're basically having to learn half of a totally established routine
Yeah.
with all the nuances of it, all the inflections in your voice, the pauses, the comedy timing, or whatever. That's just second nature if someone's been doing it their whole life.
Yeah, of course.
And then the following year, Dad worked with Jeff Hughes.
Oh, yes, yes.
Brilliant comedy actor who's sadly no longer with us. But he said the same thing. They made him do the cabinet with my dad, and he said it was unbelievably difficult. They enjoyed doing it. Once they got it, thought it was brilliant, but found it unbelievably difficult. And I remember Dad and I having a conversation, and I said, I don't understand why they find it difficult. It's weird because I can't have any frame of reference of not knowing it, because I've grown up with it my whole life. I could say all the words in it. And he said, we should work together. And I was like, it just hadn't ever occurred to me that it was an option. It just never really seemed like something that would be real. And I'd left the job in Brighton at that point. And Dad said to me, well, why don't we give it a go? Why don't we see, you know, all our old routines? And I think it suddenly occurred to Dad, having thought he was just going to have to go solo now, suddenly thought, hang on a minute, as long as Alan's all right with Ben doing all this and us carrying on under a different guise, we can basically resurrect Simmons Brothers stuff and tweak it and whatever. And we did a night at the Water Rats pub in King's Cross, where it was a bit crazy, really, but I'd had to learn maybe 5 or 6 of their old routines, and we did them all in one night.
Blimey.
I can't remember if we did the cabinet, because it's quite big, and to travel that to that venue, I can't remember if we did or not.
It doesn't even fit in that venue.
Like the silk routine, we did the steps, we did the paper tearing routine that they do.
Yeah.
And it all went so well, and Dad said, I think we're onto something here, because there, at the time, I still don't think there are really, there wasn't a father and son double act, like actually working as a father and son in the UK.
No, you're
and
right.
It all kind of took off from there, really. We then got a panto together the following year, and then sort of not looked back, you know.
Oh, that's brilliant. So how did you approach Chroma and pantomime and say, okay, Simmons and Simmons really is back, and we're ready? So was it a natural progression? Because I know that Keith, and you started to write with Keith, you do pantos together, you prepare them, write them, and rehearse them, and then you perform them together. Now, was it natural for the venues to go, great, let's do it? And obviously you've done that first gig and it just went perfectly, so it must have been quite easy to ease straight into seasons.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that came quite naturally, and me having a sort of performing background anyway, I wasn't sort of daunted by it. What I found quite funny was certainly for about 18 months after Dad and I started working together, and we did various one-nighters all over. We did charity shows for the Water Rats, for other people. We did quite a lot of shows in quite a short space of time all over. And for about 18 months, people would keep coming up to me afterwards, giving me advice, saying, oh, you should do this, you should do that. You're not being hard enough with him there, or you're being too nice to him there, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, it all kind of stopped, and I kind of felt like people had accepted it and knew I was doing a good job. And it was really sort of interesting to see. Obviously, you appreciate other people in the business who are more experienced giving you advice and stuff, but then it was kind of nice to go, I think I've got this now, I've nailed this, because that's all kind of stopped. And then obviously I understand, to go into panto, the panto producers were probably quite happy to have Dad and the routines in, and I would have been a bit of an unknown quantity at that time. So whilst it's not a risk having a comedy act with established routines, you know, they would have known Alan wasn't doing it anymore and I was doing it instead. But once we did it, what was great about a lot of our panto contracts was we kept getting asked back by the venues year after year. Yes. We did 5 years in Derby, we did 3 years in Weston-super-Mare, we did 2 years in Worthing, we're now on our 4th year in Lytham St Anne's, and it just makes you feel like you must be doing something right because the venues and the people in that area keep wanting to have you back in their theatre in their town, you know, which is great.
That's amazing. It speaks for itself, doesn't it, when you keep getting rebooked all the time. And when you look at the reviews as well on your website, it's brilliant. You get their routines are executed with such perfect timing that I couldn't help be reminded of the late great Tommy Cooper at his best. And that was the Sussex newspaper. So that must have been when you was in Worthing. But you've got great reviews, and it's like you have been, you know, doing it for years, and yet you have been doing it for years, but you know, you fell straight into it naturally, and because you've been watching from afar for so long, it was in your head, and it seems to be the perfect matching. It must be so nice to work with your dad as well. The bond is there, isn't it?
Definitely, and it's funny because again, when you don't know any different, it doesn't seem strange to you. And so many people over the years, not necessarily performers, people in all kinds of professions have said to me, I can't believe you work with your dad. I couldn't work with my dad. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
We wouldn't get on like that. And even before we even thought of working together, when I was a kid, growing up, I just remember with my mum and dad just having a load of laughs and having a great time. There was never much sort of teenage angst from me or anything like that. I don't remember having huge arguments. We always had quite a great time while I was growing up. And then Dad, a naturally funny person. He's not quite one of those people that's always performing, whether they're on or off stage, but he always finds the humour in any kind of situation.
Yes.
So yes. I've always had a kind of silly relationship with my dad. Like, we'll come up with stupid names for each other and just banter with each other all the time. And that sort of just carried on into working together. It's funny now, when we're writing, we don't have arguments, but obviously you disagree on things sometimes. And again, there are times when we're both in hysterics while we're writing, and there are times when it gets a bit more serious, and one says, why don't we do this? And the other one says, well, no, I don't agree with that. We should do this and that. And there has to be some sort of compromise.
Of course,
but,
yeah.
I mean, just generally, I've always got on brilliantly with Dad. We very, very rarely have had sort of crosswords and fallen out or anything like that. We've always had a naturally silly, borderline stupid relationship, and it's just continued professionally.
It's blossomed. It's amazing. It's so nice to hear, and you're all really lovely people. Alan, Keith, yourself, you know, you're just such a lovely family, and you're always welcoming. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's we'll talk about this shortly, but on your radio show, or whether it's doing a show together. And you always made me feel welcome, you know. So I feel like I am one of your brothers, you know, because we'll get on to talking about the water rats as well. Now, just quickly, what part of it do you love with your father? Is it the writing, the rehearsing, the actual performing on stage, or just the paycheck at the end of it? Or does he give you pocket money?
Well, firstly, thanks for what you said. That's nice, because I think we have always tried to be like that. Wherever we've gone, and I've picked this up from Dad, Dad always wanted to know about other people in the show, hear stories about other people, share stories. A load of that part of the industry is, if you're doing one-nighters and even a relatively short season, you're not with people for very long. You can be like ships that pass in the night. But then when you become mates with people, you may not see them for a few months or years, but then you just get back into it whenever you work together again. And I've always loved that, and I've always liked just doing shows, chatting to people, and sort of becoming friends with people. And I don't understand anybody that would be kind of standoffish with anyone in this industry. Certainly, it's all about relationships and building relationships and just getting on the best you can.
Yeah, that's amazing. Naturally, being a brother water rat, you were growing up in a water rat world, and your father's passion within the order, it's epic, isn't it? He's a really key member of the Rats and has been for decades. But I've personally thanked your father time and time again for introducing me to Her Majesty the Queen and my wife, and he was key in getting us in Buckingham Palace. So did he propose you, and what do the water rats mean to you, Ben?
Yeah, sure. I mean, he joined, Dad and Alan joined the Water Rats in the late 80s, and I could see just by being at home and hearing stories about it when he came back how much he loved it straight away. He loved the camaraderie, the sort of excitement of it, the fact that it was a sort of special organisation that you had to be invited to join. You couldn't just say, I'm going to join this and it happened, you know. And it's not the sort of secretive nature of it. Obviously, it's a charity, it does good things, but it's this belonging to something that's a little bit more than just your industry, and then having a standing within that. I mean, Alan always sort of took a little bit of a step back, I feel. Like, he really enjoyed going to the lodge meetings and taking part in it and chatting to people and hearing stories and sharing stories. But Dad actually wanted to get involved in the running of the order and knowing the inner workings of it. And I know he was so proud when he got to be King Rat, and he's done that twice. 2002 and 2011.
Brilliant.
And as soon as he knew there was a chance of him becoming King Rat the second time, by which point I'd been working in the industry for maybe 7-8 years and done various shows. Many of shows are done on behalf of the Water Rats as well. And he said to me, I would love it if you would consider joining the Water Rats the year that I'm King Rat. And I know so he did propose me, and then Melvin Hayes seconded me.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I loved that night. That night I had my making. Obviously, until it happens to you, you're not quite sure what it's all about and how it's going to work. And that first time where you experience being in the room where it all happens and then seeing what it's like, it's quite emotional, and you feel quite proud knowing that there aren't that many people in history who've ever done that and experienced that and become a part of it. It's still less than 1,000 members? It may be slightly more than 1,000 now. I'm not sure.
It's over 900, but it's definitely under 1,000.
Yeah. And so in 2011, I became a Water Rat. And I was Baby Rat, and some people are the Baby Rat for a long time until another person is initiated. It can go months, even years. But within about a month, Ken Dodd got initiated into the Water Rats, whilst Dad was King Rat again. And it was partly because of Dad that Ken agreed to do it, because he'd originally passed the vote to become a member in the 60s or 70s, I think, and just never happened. And so Dad convinced him to come into the order that year as well. So not only did I join, he then got one of his heroes actually to become a member while he was still the King Rat, and I know he loved that as well.
Oh, that's incredible.
I've always enjoyed being a part of the Water Rats. I don't think, a bit like my uncle, I'm kind of in between my dad and uncle. I like it. I'd like to get a bit more involved. I don't think I'd like to be involved in the running of it, but equally I wouldn't like to just step back and literally just turn up. I'd like to stand for office and do something a little bit within the meetings as well.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward after the summer when we can start the meetings again, definitely.
Yeah, and that's brilliant, because I would really like to get to know you more. You know, we've met on loads of shows backstage and stuff, but I think the order is, the banter in there is just incredible, you know, and it brings happiness and joy, and it helps charities at the same time. So it's and I got to know you more because of it. So I'm thankful to the order, and your dad's been so good to me. He's you know, always made me feel welcome. I remember seeing you both at Chroma. Actually, you come up to see me and meet Archie Andrews. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Oh, that was great. That was great. I think John Major was there.
That's right. Yeah, that was a bizarre thing, wasn't it? I remember we saw the show and John Major was in the audience. It's just something you would never imagine. That's what I love about this business as well. It becomes a thing when celebrities are watching shows or notable people are watching shows, and you don't know necessarily when or why. And it's all, Dad always tells a story about him and Alan did panto, and Barry Manilow came to see the show, and it was at the time when Barry Manilow was probably at his hugest. It was like such a big name back then. They always got a kid up on stage near the end of the panto to tell a joke, and it had gone round the audience that Barry Manilow was there,
Right.
and they said, right, tell us a joke then, and no one knew he was going to say this, and the kid went, what time did Barry Manilow arrive at the theatre today? And everyone sort of hushed and went, I don't know, and he said, about 5 minutes after his nose. Apparently he came round and met people afterwards, Barry Manilow, and Dad and Alan were worried he was going to be offended because they'd let this kid tell this joke, but he loved it and thought it was brilliant.
That's genius. That's brilliant.
Another thing I wanted to say about the water rats, I mean, we can't give away what actually goes on in the meetings because of the nature of it, but another thing I love about it is people that belong to that order of all kind of different ages and levels of experience who are involved in all kinds of different parts of our industry.
Yes.
And I love sitting there and just listening to the stories of some of the more experienced people and hearing things that you would never know about that they've been involved in for decades, you know, and just people sharing their experiences of the industry is what makes that great. And like you say, when I first started going, I was one of the younger ones, and there's a lot of kind of older guys there, and you feel there's a generational gap, but it's your brother rat, so you can chat to anybody about anything. But when you came in, and now there's quite a few that are sort of a little bit younger, like around about our age as well.
Yeah.
So I know there's you, there's Sean Rollison, there's Steve Etherington, there's probably a load more now, but Andy Eastwood's come in, and all people that
Yes.
kind of feel are around a similar age to me. And again, you've got different levels of knowing about people within the order then as well, and that's what I love as well.
It's amazing. It would be great to keep it going, wouldn't it? And to have this order thrive. And there's never more than 200 members, but sadly we lost at least 11 in the last year, I believe, and it's been a horrible loss for the world. But to have many water rats leave us in this time, and we've not been able to properly celebrate them has been awful. But just last week was Tom O'Connor. And
Yeah.
I remember being sat next to Tom O'Connor just on one of the last lodges I went to, and it was wonderful to see him in there. And then you sat next to Nicholas Parsons or you know, past King Rat, Rick Wakeman. It's incredible. And you say about people from different genres of the business sat together, actors, musicians, comedians, ventriloquists, magicians. It's a wonderful thing, and I know we're blessed, and we don't take it for granted. It's a wonderful thing to be part of.
Yeah, like you say, it's such a shame when you lose members. Obviously, it's going to happen when you have older members of the Rats. Obviously, you get new people then coming through. But yeah, what's been a shame about the pandemic is because of not meeting up, we haven't been able to initiate any new members. So yeah, we need to, as soon as we're able to meet up again, we need to start rectifying that and building it all back up and, like you say, making sure it thrives into the future.
Eyes and Teeth.
The show that goes like this on Phoenix FM. I love when I get a chance to listen in, Ben. I love how you produce your show and perform and present it. It's brilliant, and you have a lot of regulars as well on the show. So how did that come about? And you're so good at talking and having great ideas for the radio show, and so that must be a passion of yours to be in control of something, you know, that you could take out there every Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I love doing that, and thanks for those comments. That's nice to hear. What's important to me is when you work as a double act, I've had some of the greatest experiences working with Dad as a double act, but I've always wanted to have something that was just me solo as well, that was just my thing, and to be known for something that's not Simmons and Simmons, that's, Ben Simmons does this. And bizarrely, my wife's from Essex, so we've lived in Essex now for 15 years, and we moved to Brentwood about 7 years ago.
Yes.
And I knew there was a local radio station here that was kind of really well thought of and well run, and not just a sort of backstreet radio thing with people who don't know what they're doing.
Sure.
And I went there, and they had me on as a guest, just talking about my experience as a comedy writer and as a performer. and I didn't think anything more of it. And about 6 months later, I remember Hayley said to me, I've seen online they're looking for people. Why don't you actually see if you could do a show? And talk about getting thrown in at the deep end. The guy who runs the radio station is great. And he said to me, I'll come down and I'll show you how all the technical equipment works. And if it goes well, then you might be able to do your own show and we'll talk about that. So I was expecting to just go down and be trained on this technical equipment. And he took me into the studio and he went, right, this fader does that fader does that. You've got to press here to put someone, you can drag that in there. This is a computer that does this and this. Just give it a go. He said, I'll do the speaking, you put the music on. I went, right, and I did it once. And he went, yeah, that's it. Right, next time when this song ends, you speak in between. I was like, what? I was actually on the air.
Wow.
And I guess it's a kind of good foot in the door because you're kind of just forced to do it.
Yes,
But
yes.
also, another thing I did on my own, as well as working with Dad, was comedy impro. I've always loved impro, like Whose Line Is It Anyway style sketches where the audience shout things out and you have to adapt and perform whatever they say.
Yeah, I love that.
And that's helped me kind of not panic when you're doing any kind of performing and something doesn't happen as you expect, or you get put a bit under a bit of pressure and have to do something. And it certainly helped with the radio. And that first night I then did like about 5 or 10 links in between songs, and because I was a bit new to it, I was just basically saying what one song was and introducing the next song and then mentioning the station name. And I did that, and then the guy said, I think you'd be great and let's have a chat about doing your own show. And what I wanted with my own show was, I always think what would appeal to me to listen to on the radio. I know there's you're vying with a load of different other things for the listeners on the airwaves, but the internet has opened it up to so many more people. It's amazing. And I've always tried to not be constrained with a musical genre or time. I mean, there are specialist shows on Phoenix that are just rock music or kind of just musicals and things like that, but I always wanted to be able to play anything. And I quickly latched onto, I found a website that tells you all stupid holidays that are celebrated all over the world. And like, I can't even remember off the top of my head the more ridiculous ones now. There was like Slap Your Irritating Co-worker Day that occurs every year on the same day. There's Measure Your Feet Day occurs on the same day every year. Automotive Service Professionals Day, all stupid things like this, but are actually real things. And I would find one of those or a couple of those and then think about songs you could link to them. So Automotive Service Professionals, you can play anything with cars in it, like Billy Ocean's Get Out of My Dreams, Get Into My Car.
Oh, that's good.
That's just occurred to me now. So I'd always find songs to link to themes, and then I always wanted to have interviews, and you've been very kind and been on my show a couple of times. And it's nice to get celebrity interviews. I've always liked quizzes and polls, so I get people, that listeners, the chance to be interactive with it. I think it's more entertaining if you can get involved and do something and get a shout out, hear your name on the radio. People always tend to enjoy that, you know.
No, it's always nice when I feel like I've not been on radio or in the media or doing a little bit of telly. If it does come up, I just send you a message because I know I'm going to get mentioned, and it keeps my name out there. So I appreciate that. You always give me a good mention, and it literally is really good fun to take part, because sometimes I'm fighting with Eddie Bushell to get the top points, and it's. Yeah, we're all trying to fight with Eddie Bushell to get points. So
it's funny you should say. I've recently introduced a new thing, and I'll have to get you to do this as well, because I remembered Top Gear, where they got the celebrities to do the driving around the course, and then they have that kind of live league table that always got updated, and they put the celebrities' time and say, oh look, you're between, I don't know, Daniel Radcliffe and Steve McFadden from EastEnders, your times. And I thought that was brilliant. So I've now instigated, instead of giving out a Legend of the Week award every week for someone who's said something brilliant during the show, I now have created a League of Legends, and I call the quiz Ben's Impossible Questions. So I asked 3 questions that you couldn't possibly know the answer to, and you have to get as close as possible.
Oh.
And at the end, you get a score, and you find out where you are in the league table.
I want to do that. I want to do that. I tell you what.
Yeah, that's a verbal contract now.
Okay, I'll bring Arthur Lager actually to join me, because he joined me on Eggheads, and although we came fourth on that as well, 2 heads are better than 1. I once went on was it Radio 2 with Mike Reed, and I done his pop quiz, and that was fantastic. And my genre was the Beach Boys, so all 10 questions on the Beach Boys. But I had Arthur Lager with me, and he really helped me remember things. So we'll bring him on.
Brilliant. 2 heads are better than 1, even if they're ultimately the same brain. I like that.
Yeah, but try telling the Eggheads team that. They hated that there was 2. And I think one of them questioned it. And then with what you just said in that comment about, the same brain, it was just me. And that brain wasn't that good, to be honest.
Yeah, nice. I don't think I've ever done any kind of official quiz on anything else. I got invited onto Bernie Clifton's BBC radio show when he did Radio Sheffield. I think one year we were in Derby.
Oh, yeah.
We went across to Sheffield, and he had like a sort of panel show, but they sent through all the things you were supposed to be knowledgeable about. It was all kind of that week's TV and stuff. Okay. And they sent it through to you beforehand for you to kind of gen up on. So Dad and I were on that, and I was trying to sound like I knew everything that was going on Gogglebox at the time, when if they hadn't sent this thing through, I'd have never looked and wouldn't have had a clue.
Oh, that's brilliant. You've done your research there. That's the professional in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so radio was allowed to go ahead last year, really. So I'm hoping that it didn't sort of ruin your plans too much with the radio. But also, your Christmas cracker still got pulled in 2020 in December. There's no stopping Simmons and Simmons when you and Gareth Gates, Nicky French and Santa Claus down in North Devon at the Queen's Theatre. You actually got to do a Christmas show last year, and I was lucky enough to do one in Clacton with Andrew Robley, and that was wonderful at the Westcliff Theatre. But you did the same down in Devon. How did the show go?
Yeah, well, it went really well. We felt so lucky because obviously we'd found out our pantomime had been postponed, which was sad, and you could see it all happening over the entire industry. And I think it was in the November, wasn't it, when everything went into tears and you were worried about if the place you were going to be was going to be put in a worse tier, it wouldn't be able to go ahead. And we were so lucky with North Devon. We left London the morning that it went into tier 4 and you weren't supposed to travel, so we kind of squeaked out at the last possible minute and left London. Got to North Devon, which at the time was still in tier 1.
Blimey.
So the theatre had to have social distancing in place. So instead of being a 700 capacity theatre at the Queen's, I think it was reduced to 250 or something.
Right.
But yeah, we were down to do 18 shows over 2 weeks. And I think we ended up, they only pulled the very final show. So we did 17 shows because it got put into a higher tier just around about Christmas, New Year. And brilliant. Yeah, it was so wonderful to be performing and getting messages of support on social media saying you're doing it for all of us and all the performers that can't perform. And you did feel a kind of sense of responsibility, and it was so good that some small part of the industry was still going.
Yes.
But having said that, one of the most bizarre shows to rehearse I've ever known, because you had to turn up, all wear masks, go into a rehearsal room, rehearse the show wearing masks. You had to be socially distanced on stage. So they painted, the producers did a great job actually in Med Entertainment. They painted snowflakes on the stage as part of the set. We all had our own snowflake we had to stick to, so you didn't get too close to anyone.
Oh, bless.
I could be in a bubble with Dad, so we could be close to each other because we were sharing a dressing room. But then you literally only saw the other people in the show in the wings before you were going to go on for something. You had to all have separate dressing rooms and not come out your dressing rooms. It was so... They had to maintain it. They had to make it strict, otherwise the show could have been pulled earlier if anyone had come down with COVID or anything. So
it was strange, wasn't it?
Gareth Gates and Nicky French, but didn't really spend a lot of time with them.
No.
We did have like a Christmas drink on stage, all stood apart from each other in between shows on Christmas Eve, I think.
Yeah, we did that. Yeah, we did that in Clacton.
Nice. But,
wow.
the amazing thing about Gareth Gates is he's what a brilliant performer, and he's still got a fantastic voice. When you speak to him, and I think it's because he has a speech therapist and hadn't been able to see them all throughout the lockdown. But when you speak to him just off stage on a normal kind of level, he still suffers with his stutter. But when he's on stage, it must be something about the adrenaline of performing and knowing what he needs to say about everyone. But if you were in the audience, you would think he didn't have any problem whatsoever now. It's kind of unbelievable. He's a fantastic performer and a great guy. It's obviously a shame that he's had to suffer with that throughout his life, but when he's on stage, you'd have absolutely no idea. If you chat to him off stage, you can tell it's still there, you know.
Yeah, it's incredible what adrenaline does in this business as well. And you go on stage, and obviously in the last couple of days, we've all known about the loss of a dear friend of ours called Paul Eastwood, and I've worked every night this week, and to go on knowing what was about to happen and what did happen, and then afterwards, it's hard. But the moment you step out on the stage, you kind of, it takes over, doesn't it? The spotlight takes over, and if you've got a spotlight, and it really does get you through the show.
I can remember I joined a youth theatre at the Orchard Theatre in Dartford from the age of like 15 to 18, and we did a version of the Scottish play. We did our own sort of almost like variety show, and that was my first real experience of nerves before you're about to go on stage. And almost every single time that happened to me, I'd be not panicking, but I'd be like, oh my God, I'm about to do this. And then you'd go out and something would just change within me, and I would instantly relax as soon as you're out there performing. And it's a kind of adrenaline that gets you through it, but it's also knowing it's what you want to do and the environment you really enjoy, and that's your work, and it feels fantastic. And I don't really get nerves as such now. The only time I get nervous is on behalf of a show, if you like, because we've directed it and written it, and you want it to go well, and you're kind of worried about quick changes, or you're worried about how things are going to be received, rather than worried about your own performance and whether you can do it. Obviously you want it to go well, but I don't get nerves as such like that anymore. But yeah, if you're feeling slightly under the weather, if you've got issues in your life that are affecting you and you might feel up or down or whatever, you go out on stage and you just kind of forget about all that, and it's the rapport with the audience, it's the general sort of ambience in the theatre. What I've always loved about any kind of show, and particularly when you do seasons like summer seasons or pantomime, is the camaraderie you get of a big group kind of working as a team to put that on and make it happen. I always loved that, really.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so good. And I was so entertained when I was doing a season. I don't know if I was doing a Christmas show. I think I was in Branson, Missouri doing this show, but you could still connect to the internet. And I was so glad that I did, because I got to see you and your dad do sketches in between your pantomimes, and you do all these brilliant sketches every day, and it was almost like a Christmas calendar. You count the days down, but you just write a sketch for every day for Facebook Live, and it was genius and very entertaining. It's fantastic that you do that.
Yeah, thanks for that. No, I've always really loved that. From quite a young age as well, once the technology was there, I always had video cameras, I always made little films with my friends, and I've always really enjoyed that. And then that's extended into professionally as well. I've kind of made a rod for my own back now, because people kind of expect it. Whenever you're doing a panto, you're going to find some kind of way of producing something every day that you can put out on social media. It was originally intended to be a kind of, let's have a look behind the scenes and show people a bit more of what's going on.
Yes.
And then because of the nature of a comedian, you then think, well, I ought to be seen to be doing something funny as well. And then you think, well, hang on, I've got to actually come up with something funny every day.
then you're writing them, producing them.
There's that little extra bit of pressure, but I love doing it. I've always loved it, and I've kind of driven that the last few years as well, the things that we put out and do. And Dad's always up for it. He loves being part of it, but I'm the one that's filming it and editing it and putting it out there.
Yeah. Dad, stop giving me ideas. I need to work. You got to do another 3 hours after it's finished.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But mate, it's incredible. It's so nice to know you. I've been a fan of your uncle and your dad for so many years, from the Ron Lucas show to the Des O'Connor shows. and you know, it's so nice that you've kept it going and you're working with your dad. I love you guys to bits. You are my brothers, and I love working with you. And so I had to have you on. And Keith said, could I be part of the Keith Harris tribute show up in Blackpool, which sold out. It was an incredible night, and you guys stormed it. You had such a great spot, and it was really poignant for you to be there, because when I was 14, it was the first variety show I ever went to. I went to the Weymouth Pavilion, and it was Keith Harris with Orville, it was Bobby Crush, and it was the Simmons brothers. And I never forgot that. I never forgot that at all. And when I'd done this tribute show for Keith Harris, it was all for Keith. And we had Bobby Crush and we had the Simmons. Although it was emotional, it was a really beautiful circle where do you know what I mean? It was full circle, and we all paid tribute to him in a brilliant way. But I want to thank you and your dad for coming down to that show, because it meant a lot that you were there.
No, thanks so much for having us. It was a great occasion. It felt really special as well. And I have to say, you and Nina did a brilliant job in putting that on and producing it. And it was so well organised. Everyone was so well looked after. And that was a great day. But it's funny, everything you've just said there, I remember that season in Weymouth. Dad always says that was a really enjoyable season. They had a brilliant time there, because they worked with Keith Harris. Dad and Alan worked with him quite a bit over the years, and a couple of TV things they did with him as well, and got to know him really well. And that's so brilliant that you saw that show and you remember that show. But that night in Blackpool where we all worked together, it was great. There was so many people on the bill. First of all, we had a brilliant dressing room. I can't quite remember everyone, but we shared a dressing room with the Grumbleweeds, with Jimmy Cricket, with the Crankies, and Bobby Crush, I think. Which, when you think about it, the chance of getting all those people in the same room, again, the stories there were brilliant. But one thing I must just tell you, the show was great. I loved it. Loved being part of it, and it was so great that it was a tribute to Keith Harris, who was a brilliant performer himself. But Dad, over the last I think probably 5 or 6 years, has let his hair go really white. He always used to kind of dye it for a bit, but he's let it go white now.
Right.
And we've never played on this before, and we got this idea because of, as we left the Viva cabaret rooms in Blackpool where that was that night, there were some guys coming out of a pub who shouted at my dad, "Look, it's the Doc out of Back to the Future. It's Doc out of Back to the Future." And because he's got that big white hair, Dad, we'd never really thought about it before. We're like, we need to do some sort of Back to the Future tribute, because he does really look like Christopher Lloyd in that film. It was hilarious.
No, that's amazing. So you got Christopher Lloyd and you got the Milky Bar Kid walking out of a great cabaret venue in Blackpool, and you just say, "We have gone back to the future. Milky Bars are on you." There you are.
Time travel, and you end up with the Doc from Back to the Future and the Milky Bar Kid. You'd be worried that something's gone wrong in the timeline somewhere, and you've messed it all up. And
I tell you what, mate, I wish we could go back at least 30 years. This has been a crazy time for the world, but I think this business has pulled me through. It's pulled me through this time, and although it's still out there, it's, you know, I think there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I think there's a lot more happier people about, because comedians, comedy shows, people like you doing your radio show, we're out there and we're entertaining again, and it's much needed, not just for the audience but for us entertainers. We've missed it, and it's great to be back, isn't it, Ben?
Oh yeah, most definitely. You know, and having gigs come in, get bookings come in, being able to know we're working on a pantomime that, all being well, should be going ahead this year, and you know, we're getting together and writing the script for it now, getting production meetings lined up. It just feels like it's coming back, and when there's been so much uncertainty for our industry, it really does make you feel hopeful for it. What I've loved as well during the pandemic is people like yourself doing this podcast, which is fantastic, and you're getting to hear stories from great performers all throughout the industry and everything. People have found kind of new ways to keep the entertainment business going, and podcasts are brilliant. You know, Zoom has enabled people to meet up, and you get I've done a couple of impro shows for my friend on Zoom that were then broadcast on Facebook Live and stuff, you know, and it's fine. Well, technology's been brilliant. When you think there were pandemics that occurred 100 years ago to 300 years ago, you know, and people were literally just confined to their houses. It has felt great having the technology to keep you closer to people and linked to people, and it's been brilliant seeing the people adapt within our industry to still be out there and still be performing, and now it's coming back. Yeah, brilliant.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's great to be your brother. Ben Simmons, thanks for being on Eyes and Teeth, and good luck with the basketball work.
Thanks so much, Steve. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Brilliant to speak to you as ever. I will have to get you on my radio show again to do my quiz, and I'm going to go outside and throw a few hoops now, and I'll tell my wife if I go and meet up with my jammer later. Thanks so much, Steve. Thanks for having me on, and to everybody, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Eyes and Teeth.
Thanks to Ben Simmons, and it's good to finally put to rest the rumours about Mayor Jammer so we can all continue on with our day. To see more of Ben and contact Mayor Jammer on Twitter, that was one of the jokes that I do. Ben's not the only one to have a namesake. I've had one myself, as I heard on BBC Radio 4 in 2016 when BBC presenter Steve Hewlett talks about Steve Hewlett, the ventriloquist.
Right, JP, any more stories about similar names?
Yeah, we've been asking for your stories about getting confused with a famous namesake, but what's it like from the other side if you are the famous person? Let's talk to a couple of famous people. Let's start off with Radio 4 presenter Steve Hewlett, just fresh from his media show extravaganza on Thursday, discussing the white paper. Hello, Steve.
Morning.
Tell us about your other Steve Hewlett then, Steve.
Well, so the first thing is, I didn't know there were any other Steve Hewletts. I suppose by chance there must be, but anyway, I wasn't aware of them. When I first joined up to Twitter, which I did years ago, I couldn't get the name Steve Hewlett. And I wondered why that was. I had a Steve _Hewlett. And as time goes on, I became vaguely aware of a ventriloquist whose name was Steve Hewlett. The best point of which was, and there have been various interactions over the years, but the best one was when my agent was approached by ITV to see how much I would charge for appearances on Britain's Got Talent. And I thought, have they fallen out with Piers Morgan? Has Simon broken his leg? I honestly thought for a moment, blimey, this could really be my big break.
How much would you charge, Steve?
It was going to be astronomical. It was going to be, sort of 5 or 6 or 7 times my Radio 4.
100 quid?
It's 125 actually.
Well, listen, I tell you, I know the other Steve Hewlett. He's been on this programme and he's a very, very fine ventriloquist as well.
Indeed he is.
He is indeed. But I would say you're a bigger star, Steve.
Oh, heavens. Don't tell Steve Hewlett the constant.
Steve, thank you very much. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Steve Hewlett from the BBC, rest in peace. Ben Simmons is on Twitter at Ben Sim Radio and Facebook as Ben Simmons. Or you can find him on Ben Simmons Radio on Facebook for the radio connection and get involved with his show every Tuesday. Check out Ben and Keith's website at www.simmonsandsimmons.org.uk. Today's quote comes from another half of a comedy duo, Martin and Lewis. Jerry Lewis. I shall pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. Jerry Lewis. Eyes and Teeth is written, produced and hosted by Steve Hewlett. Vocals by Larissa, Lola and Nina Hewlett. Additional vocals by Rich T. The Eyes and Teeth music and jingles are produced and performed by Water Rat, Kevin Dean. Join me for my 100th anniversary episode when I'm delighted to talk to the legend from the London Palladium, Jimmy Tarbuck, OBE.